Hey everyone, welcome to the Horizon 5 car review series. It's finally back. Now, some of you may already be familiar with these reviews from Horizon 4, but we're going to slow it down for this inaugural Horizon 5 episode and explain a bit about what we do on this series for those of you who are new to the car reviews. Now, our final review of Horizon 4 was the cover car, the McLaren Senna, and it felt like a really fitting way to send off the series for a bit. But now that we're back, I figure we should kick things off again by taking a look at Forza Horizon 5's cover car, the Mercedes-AMG ONE. The AMG ONE was first introduced to the world way back at Germany's International Motor Show in 2017 by none other than Lewis Hamilton. At the time, it was known as the Project One and showcased Formula One technology. We later learned that this was because both the hybrid motors and gas-powered engine were based heavily on Mercedes' actual F1 car at the time, only with some changes being made to accommodate the heavier chassis and make the Project One road legal. This led to the hybrid powertrain in the Project One capable of producing a whopping 1,049 horsepower. The Formula One inspiration doesn't stop there though. Its 7-speed automatic and full carbon fiber chassis further drive home that F1 spirit. Now, although we first saw the concept in 2017, it wasn't until just this month, June 1st, 2022, that the production version was unveiled. That's right, we had this in Forza long before people had it in the real world. And there's a lot more of us Horizon players with the car as well, as AMG limited production of the One to only 275 cars, of which Lewis Hamilton owns 2. The car costs a whopping $2.7 million US, and the engine only lasts about 30,000 miles before having to be taken in for a rebuild. Luckily, in Horizon, that's not an issue, so let's take the AMG ONE out for a spin and chat about what I like and what I think needs some work. Now, of course, one of the major headlining features of this car is its ability to switch between 2 different driving modes on the fly, track mode or highway mode. For this review, we're just going to focus on the car in its track mode with the improved downforce. So the AMG ONE sits in the middle of S2 class at 927 PI. Too high to drop into S1 for an on-road build, so we'll focus here on an S2 track spec. In its stock configuration though, it does drive really well. You can feel the downforce at work. Although the car is all-wheel drive, it doesn't understeer much at all. The brakes are great, and it feels super planted through corners. My one criticism here is that it lacks some response. This could be due to the thinner front semi-slick tires, high rear aero, or the fact that it's mid-engined. Some Porsches often have a similar lack of dive on the turn-in. It's still very precise. It doesn't feel sloppy or hard to handle by any means, but it's not quite as snappy as I would like, especially for a car so inspired by F1 tech. This is a case where one of the car's biggest features might just be its biggest downfall. Because of the fancy on-track adjustable aero, I don't believe there is any way to further tune downforce in menus. We'll confirm that though once we're in the garage for the build. As for my final thoughts on the stock car test drive, the car definitely feels speed limited by its downforce, so we'll see what we can do to solve that, if anything. I also want to try and increase its turn-in response through some suspension tuning and maybe more front tire grip, and also try to work around the lack of adjustable aero in S2, which might be tricky. Alright, now let's jump into the workshop and see what options we've got for the AMG ONE. Starting with conversions, all we can do here is swap the car to rear-wheel drive, which, while interesting, is not something we typically do for the car reviews. We can, though, upgrade the tire compound to full slicks and increase front tire width, so those are mods we're likely to do. The AMG ONE is actually pretty heavy, weighing in at over 3,700 pounds, but luckily we can drop that with some weight reduction. Race suspension can also be installed, which removes the raising and lowering effect from the driving mode switch, while also giving us suspension tuning options. And then finally, it looks like we will be able to bump up power from the stock 877 that the production model gives us. Alright folks, well, I'm going to get my hands dirty with some mods, and I'll be back with a build in a sec. And here it is, our S2 track build for the Mercedes-AMG ONE. Pushing 1,195 horsepower and weighing in still at over 3,100 pounds, This car is still on the heavy side when it comes to the best of the S2 lineup, but let's see if it can make up for it with that modern F1 tech on the test track. Checking out the replay here on our hot lap, coming into Albuquerque, you can take this flat out, but only if you set the corner up perfectly. Anything other than a stable outside start will see you having to ease off. Brake Magic's transition into Bug-Eye saw some understeer, but as long as you brake a little early, you'll be just fine and tackle Bug-Eye smoothly. Glacier into the Anchovy setup feels phenomenal in this car. It grips up and stays stable without much effort, and you can get hard on the gas coming out of Anchovy Apex. Kitagawa's hairpin does demand you slow down quite a bit, but you can again get back on the gas hard once you're past the Apex and out of Sector 1. The test of courage is rightly named, and it is terrifying in this car, and although it's possible to stay flat out, I often eased up coming into Confluence. You get pretty close to the car's top speed coming into Benji's Bends, which can be pretty rough in the faster classes, but with a bit of throttle management and precise turn-in, it was no issue in the AMG. You do get some airtime before Puma, and the bank with the elevation change causes the car to dart in a bit more than you might expect, so this was a surprisingly hard corner to master. You can stay on full throttle though on the uphill into Bear Bend, and in the hairpin there's a great flow if you set up a bit of a late apex and then ease off and let the car roll into the banked uphill. The exit though, coming into Simons, was another hard corner to master, and I often found myself under-braking for the corner. Finally though, we can relax a bit along Icarus. Although the AMG ONE doesn't have the best cornering at speed, it still is extremely stable and predictable. What is not easy is the Chicanish Inquisition. Not only is this a surprisingly large car, it's also not very nimble. I ended up hitting a minimum speed of only 70 miles an hour through Chicanish on my hot lap. On the other side though, coming out of Chicanish into Rush, it's pretty smooth sailing. The final right-hander into the finish can be taken flat out, but I often found myself easing up a bit to help the setup back into Albuquerque. So let's pull up the S2 leaderboard here and see how the AMG ONE stacks up. I was able to manage a hot lap time on the official test track of 1:58.849, a time that may have taken me about a half hour to get, but one that I am quite proud of. It places us at rank 13 on our Discord leaderboard and beats my baseline time in the 918 by 2 full seconds. Now let's head over to the Hoki score and see how it stacks up there. If this is your first time seeing this scoring system, welcome to the Hoki score, the scoring system where everything's made up and the points don't matter. Really though, this is all for fun and shouldn't be taken too seriously. It's also a point system that rewards cars that are good at multiple things. So if a car is a track beast but terrible at everything else, it'll likely get a lower score than a car that's decent at a lot of stuff. This isn't a meta performance rating, it's a rating on how fun, how cool, or how flexible a car is. So with that, let's reveal our first category of scores. And for looks, I'm giving the AMG ONE a 9. It's a beautiful and very unique looking car. It's instantly recognizable and straddles the line between elegance and aggressiveness perfectly. The only reason I'm not giving it a 10 here is because personally, I'm a fan of sharper body lines, and the one is pretty curvy. As for sound, this one was tough. Being based on an F1 engine, I expected more F1 sound, but it's really quite tame. It sounds fine, it sounds like a hypercar, but just lacks that rowdiness that I would want in a car with so much power. Realistically though, this is kinda where the industry is headed, with hybrid turbo engines muffling the raw exhaust note. Moving on though to customization, the AMG ONE expectedly gets a pretty low score here. No aero at all, including Forza aero, no engine swaps, no wheel spacing, limited power upgrades. There really aren't any other cars with less customization than the AMG ONE, and that's why it gets a 1. Now for fun factor, I'm giving the AMG an 8. We'll touch on this more at the end of the video, and forgive me for using an overused analogy, but the ONE is kind of like the Dark Souls of cars. It's extremely challenging when pushed to the top of S2, but surprisingly rewarding. Now, as for the performance scores, these focus on the car's intended purpose and offline performance, and I think nothing is really out of the ordinary here. It's a great handling car that can't drift, and for what it's worth, it's actually adequate if built into rally. Not necessarily fun to drive, but capable of top 1,000 times without much issue. Now for online, this is where things got interesting, because the AMG ONE is not used online, not commonly anyway. That said, I took my build into Horizon Open against my Twitch chat, and it performed very well. This is against meta and off-meta cars, and with some pretty solid drivers. Let's move over to the right side of the board here. The flexibility score is a sort of bonus for cars that are good at multiple things. I add the customization score with drag, rally, race, and drift, and then divide by 5 to get a flex bonus. Predictably, the Mercedes gets a pretty low score here. Now the style bonus ranges from 5 to -5, and judges how cool the car is in respect to Horizon. For example, if you saw someone bring this to an online race or car meet, would you respect it or think it's lame or overplayed? And I think the AMG ONE gets a strong 4. It's the Horizon cover car, and funny enough, you just don't ever see people using it. So if I were to see a player roll up in this, it'd put a smile on my face. Alright, so this leads us to a total combined score for the AMG ONE of 55.8. Let's pull up Horizon 4's car scores here, where we can see the One sits pretty much right in the middle, almost 10 full points below Horizon 4's cover car, the McLaren Senna, but right around some other good track-focused machines like the CLK GTR and R390. So ultimately, here's what I think about Forza Horizon 5's cover car, the Mercedes-AMG ONE. It demands perfection. This car needs to be driven at its limit or it won't perform. It's a bit heavy, it's not super nimble, and understeers compared against many other cars in its class, but if you give it a chance and learn the car, it really does reward you. It's not meta, but it is a solid car that's fun to drive in single player and absolutely worthy of being taken online. I think being the cover car and having to follow the Senna set high expectations for the AMG ONE, and maybe it didn't quite meet them. But people just tossed it aside, when really it still is a great car, and in my opinion, very worthy of being in your roster. Thanks everyone for watching, I hope you enjoyed this return to the review series, and I'll see you in the next one.